Welcome everyone back to Easing the Reader, a Wheel of Time reread podcast. My name is Chris Mary Holtman. With me is David Green. And David, would you like to introduce our very special guest, returning?
Return again, yeah, it's Rebecca from Reading the Button. How are you doing?
I am great. It's really great to be back with you guys.
Thanks for coming on. Been looking forward. We had so much fun the last time, and this is the last of the kind of. Chris isn't really enjoying the Dragon Reborn all that much.
Right.
So
not really. I was going to talk about that today.
Actually. I want to hear about that because still not into it, huh? That's too bad.
Yeah, he loved The Great Hunt, but
The Great Hunt was good.
I think I can guess that it's because this bit of the book that we're reading is very Perrin focused, and Chris hates Perrin.
Oh yeah.
I never said that, but I know I got a lot of flack for disliking Loyal on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think because to me, Loyal is like having an Ent in Lord of the Rings all the time. Like they had an Ent with them as part of their party. So it's a little bit, but I mean, we're not here to talk about, this is not the Loyal podcast.
Loyal podcast.
I don't know. I think Ents would call Loyal hasty.
Yeah, probably would do.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about from chapter 34, a different dance all the way to a hunter's oath, which is chapter 41. If my counting skills have not failed me.
Maybe, yes. I think we talked about chapter 33 last time. I actually forgot we talked about chapter 33. But that's because I also do not care very much for Perrin.
No, exactly.
So have you guys brought me on to be like a Perrin defender? Do I have to take that role? I think I can do it.
Maybe. I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not super. I don't really see. I don't warm to him in the first three books. I really like him in book 4, as I think most people do. No spoilers for Chris, but this is so. That's what I was going to say. This is the last kind of time really that you'll be kind of like, I don't really like Perrin all that much because most people like him in the 4th one, and then I have a very kind of.
Anyway, like for Perrin, like it's not the same kind of story for Perrin, so at least it's different. You can say that much. I think
it's very different, yeah. And then after that, I kind of have I like him in 6 as well, and then I have a very love-hate relationship with him from then on to the rest of it.
I felt like that was when most people didn't like Perrin, but
yeah,
it's an interesting part, because the reason I don't like Perrin, and I might as well come clean about it now, is because I think of the 3 boys or kids or whatever you want to call them, because to me they still act like little kids. They haven't really, I mean, Matt's the only one that's really kind of matured, but he's kind of matured into a little bit of an ass, which I think is fine, because I like how he interacts, because he's the only, to me, from a writer's perspective, and actually from a fantasy scholar perspective, it's funny because he kind of, he shines a light on the fantasy genre, because he like the whole formality of living in a fantasy world, what that entails and what people expect of it, he kind of turns it on its head, because he doesn't really care for it. He seems to be like, what is this crap? I'm just trying to mind my business. I just want to eat some food. And here I'm getting attacked, and there's princesses that are doing this, and here's some good-looking girls, because apparently that is very much at the forefront of his mind, at least in these chapters. And he just wants to do his thing. He's just wants to do his thing, and he doesn't care that he lives in a fantasy world where obviously things are done in a very special way. I think his arc is that he kind of challenges the tropes of. And we talked about this before, is that Robert Jordan often gets trapped in being an 80s fantasy writer, with the good parts of it and with the bad parts of it. But I think it's, and we talked about that with the innkeeper, as I call him.
He refuses to use his actual name.
Okay. Well, at least I know
but about how we talked about that, about how you view for the TV show, how you view the characters. And I was discussing this with a fellow fantasy scholar just last week. We talked about that most people who are casual fantasy readers who've read Jordan and Weiss and Hickman and Eddings and Brooks and all of those, they see that as like that's all fantasy, and that's what all fantasy is. They're white, heteronormative people because it's fantasy, and that's how they're. But obviously, that's not how it is. And I use the example as in Earthsea, where they're actually black. But I never read it like that because to me, fantasy was always white people.
Yeah.
And even if it says they're dark, I figured they were maybe tan because they were out in the sun.
I think a lot of people read dark that way. Yeah.
That's because like Wheel of Time is a prime example for that, because there is in my view, reading through it, there is characters that I would have thought of as being not when I first started reading, but as I got older and kind of like a little bit more like, you know, learned, I suppose. The characters that I thought, well, these characters may be black, right? Like especially the Two Rivers ones, because of certain scenes where people talk about how light Rand's skin is compared to them and all that kind of stuff. How Sen Yui is described as well. But you're right though as well. Like it just goes back to kind of that thing that you have in your head. And I have my friend who I got reading Wheel of Time just after I read it. So it was I think he started reading about 2001, 2002, and from then on until maybe a few months ago, he thought Loyal was blue. And it's like he's never mentioned as being blue. It's never, you know, I don't know where he got it from, but he just had it in his head the entire time that he was blue.
I mean, it's amazing what people will come up with sometimes. Like I don't remember who or where but I remember someone saying that they had always pictured Nynaeve as blonde. I'm like, well, you didn't read that. She's not blonde. Never been. I mean, other than no, even when she dyes her hair, she doesn't even dye her hair blonde at any point. But anyway, so people come up with very odd things, and so I think it's somewhat that own. Like people bring their own, you know, ideas to something, and it isn't necessarily about what's in the text. And then it's a little bit on the authors too, because there is some tendency among white authors to describe people's skin color when it is very dark. Like, you know, I don't think probably it's hard to miss that Tuon, we haven't gotten there yet, but anyway,
yeah,
there's a character that has dark skin, and it's hard to miss that. But like when a character doesn't have very dark skin, they just don't describe it.
No, I think it also is a lot about like society, because you as you know, we said you never read that a character is black in a fantasy story, because most people would read that as they're actually black. They're not dark brown, they're black, because it's a fantasy story.
Well, it's also it's sort of like a term that we use in, you know, our culture.
Exactly. Just like you'd say white. People don't really write white in fantasy either, because it's more, especially in America, it's more of a classification of a type of person that's very white. Yeah. Which is what my mother says.
Descriptors of you know, skin tones, and there's lots of overlap. You know, someone you know, they don't have the same categorizations, but there's lots of overlap in skin tones.
Yeah, it's something that has changed with kind of more modern fantasy and indie fantasy, because there's more, I think there's more of a push for, and there just is in general, because people are kind of writing the world that surrounds them now, which is great. So there is that more now, and you see a lot more on covers, particularly in and I don't want to say it's just independent or indie fantasy or anything, but there is a huge bit of it there where you do get people of color on the front covers now, compared to like a decade ago, not even a decade ago, maybe 5 years ago, where it was very, very seldom. But then you have some like mainstream authors like Brandon Sanderson that who's doing great things for inclusivity and diversity and everything. And but it is just kind of the norm. So I remember like years and years ago, Robert Jordan was talking about if he was to cast people for Wheel of Time, and it was all white people, wasn't it? Like, there was no one, and it's funny because like even in his notes where he actually went into depth on a lot of people's skin color and so on.
Yeah.
He went into it where it's like, people from this part of the world would have darker skin than these people from this part of the world and this. But when he did his own fan casting, it was all white.
Yeah. Which I don't know. I think I'm trying to remember when this was brought up, but maybe it was, I don't know, Matt Hatch who was talking about it from the notes, but like, I feel like what he was doing when he was picking these fan casts was going more of like the personality rather than the looks. Because even if you go on other characteristics like hair color or whatever, he wasn't matching that. I don't really think he was attempting to match a description. I think he was picking popular actors who he felt might have the personality to embody the character.
And all the popular actors at the time were all white. So that's just one of those things.
White,
yeah. No, it's interesting, and it's one of those things. It keeps on, and talking about it in terms of like Wheel of Time. It's something that keeps coming up, and I think it's going to be something that's going to come up in certain quarters forever. While it's in TV and film, which
and
oh God, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean we did talk about it because I think being in the Wheel of Time community, there's a lot of people that have read the book several times, whereas Amazon is going to have to cater to the ones that have read the books once and left the series and went reading something else. And they're probably...
No, he's not thinking. Is he? No, he's not thinking. He's just gone. He'll be back.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, I know it's frozen.
He's frozen in a very kind of
right. For a second, I thought maybe he was thinking really hard, but no.
Maybe he is. He just the thing just won't come to him. He's just like, what is this? What is this? We'll continue anyway. So what I was gonna say is obviously TV, but also film as well. So the last time the last episode we talked a little bit about this Age of Legends thing. I think is the best way of describing it at the moment. So what were your thoughts on that? Because I think it's a little bit fishy, to be honest.
I also agree that it's a bit fishy. I just in general, like when the news first came out, I was like, people are freaking out about this like really way too much because it's so like this. It doesn't exist yet, and it may never exist.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, we're talking years and years from now before it would ever come close to becoming a thing. So all the things that people were kind of freaking out about, like who's involved and, how's this going to affect the TV show? I was like, well, we don't need to freak out about those things because it's not really a thing yet and it's not worth freaking out about. But I think the thing that is particularly fishy is that by all appearances, Amazon and anyone connected to the show was not involved with any announcement. They didn't seem to be prepared for that announcement. And you would think that they would have been in the know, but they did not appear to be.
Yeah, and they seem to be aggressively not mentioning it as well. It's kind of like we're just
right. Which if you had been blindsided by it, I wouldn't say anything, right? So I don't know. That's what's the fishiest thing about it to me. But the way I look at it too, okay, let's look at like best case scenario here. They're hedging on the idea that the show might be successful, and that if the show is successful, there would then be interest in spin-off type properties. If you look at like what Game of Thrones is doing with their countless spin-offs, I don't even know how many they have in the works anymore. And other, popular fantasy shows are at least considering similar things. Like there was some talk about like a Shadow and Bone spin-off, and I think The Witcher is working on other things. So there's interest in those kinds.
Witcher spin-offs. Yeah. Right.
So there's interest in those kind of things, and they're thinking, well, okay, best case scenario, the Wheel of Time show is successful. There's going to be interest in that. Let's get this out there. But in that case, it would be like they're trying to create something that can be a spinoff and sell it to Amazon and Sony, I mean, is what I'm thinking. Like, you'd want to tie it in. If you were going to do it, you'd want it to be tied in. Ideally, you'd have some of the actors already in the show who would potentially also be in a spinoff like that, and you'd want to use the same people. But that's so many steps down the road, and the bigger likelihood is that that particular thing will never happen. But you know, maybe it will, but it's so many steps down the road that it's not really worth freaking out about all the details yet, is how I thought of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because that was my thought, and it was like, would I like to see this? Yes, I would. Like, you know, I would like to see it. But my thought was there it's because the timing of it was a little bit fishy for me, because it's kind of like the thing isn't out yet, but they just released a poster and they just had the little teaser of the logo and all that kind of stuff. And you know, you announce spin-offs when you know it's had that first weekend where it's kind of done well or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. So it kind of felt to me like they were kind of like, we're doing this and we would like you to pay it to buy these rights off us, otherwise they're going to go somewhere else. And it's like, if you go and make it, then that's, we don't really care, as long as you pay us for the rights for this.
It would be so premature to try to be selling it now. No one's going to buy it now. It would be later that someone might potentially want to buy it. So it's an odd thing to make a big announcement like that. I mean, do you want to be writing it and potentially preparing it to, you know, be sold and if the circumstances are promising for it, then sure, that makes sense. And I mean, the concept seems good, right? A trilogy of movies about the Age of Legends sounds really interesting, and potentially could be good, but it's just, anyway. So I was not freaked out about it, as I know some people were, but.
That's Red Eagle, and they're not called that anymore, but that's them for you anyway. They're
right, IWAT or something, and that's what people I think were worried about, that and it being something terrible. But I think the point is, they wouldn't be making it themselves, right? They would be writing this, and they own the rights to it, and then they sell it. I mean, that's how I think it would happen. If it happened.
Because that's the same with the TV show, because they still own the rights to it, but they've sold Amazon and Sony a timeline deal, which is the timeline of the 15 books.
Yeah.
If anything that's mentioned in the books can be used, similar to what the Tolkien estate did for Lord of the Rings, which we're going to talk about in a second. So that's why I was kind of thinking with them, they're going to probably say, well, you know what, why don't you buy these rights in case you want to use it, because otherwise we're going to market, we're going to try and get other people to buy it, and they may come in, make movies, and it'll be, because no spoilers for Chris, but there could be characters that are in both of them in kind of flashbacks and what have you, and other things. But also then the look of stuff, like because we were talking last time that there's people that will not watch TV shows but will watch movies, and they may see the movie of this thing and go and watch the TV show, and it's like, this is completely different. Like, the way the magic works is different. This is different. This is different. And so for Amazon and Sony to protect their kind of TV show, which they want to do for a number of years, like 8 years or whatever, it'll be like, well, we need to kind of protect what this is, which was why I kind of thought it was a little bit shenanigans, because it's kind of
you may have a good point there, that maybe the game is, let's try to convince them to just give us some more money now, not based on what we have like a script, but just to even touch the concept at all. So it could be a little threatening in that sense. But I don't know how serious a threat it is anyway. I mean, is someone else really going to buy that?
Probably not. That's the thing as well, because why would they? Like, why would they?
Right.
It's like Amazon they'll see that Amazon have the rights for this other stuff, and like,
I
think it's one of those things as well. It's they're kind of like thinking, well, Amazon have they've just spent $1 billion on Lord of the Rings. They just sent the CEO into space. They have some money.
We'll see. I think we talked about this last time too, and I've been fishing around different movie sites, especially here, like in Europe and places where Amazon isn't like a presence, because it isn't. There's a lot of places where Amazon isn't a presence, and I have a hard time seeing that the show is going to be a success, because people aren't going to be getting Amazon just for the Wheel of Time. People are, I mean, The Boys was popular, but people here in Sweden didn't get. I mean, Sweden is known for streaming illegally. They streamed The Boys illegally, and that's probably what they're going to end up doing with the Wheel of Time as well. What happened with Game of Thrones in Sweden is that it went into syndication here. So it was on Swedish television, linear television. And that is probably what they're going to have to do worldwide for if they want the Wheel of Time to be a success. Because I don't think that people are going to shell. I mean, because people already have. I mean, in a lot of European countries, there's Viaplay and Seymour, which is people have Netflix, and people have HBO, and so they're going to pay an extra fee to get Amazon and another streaming service. So they're going to have that to contend with.
It all depends on how they're gauging, like, you know, what constitutes a success. But I believe that the number of people worldwide who have Amazon Prime now is more than the number of people who had HBO prior to Game of Thrones.
Yeah, because you get it included in your Prime perk in a lot. The thing is, in Europe, there's a lot of countries that don't have Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Sweden doesn't have Amazon Prime. Amazon is
not even the TV package, the streaming, but the actual Amazon Prime delivery and all that stuff.
But well, you wouldn't really. They don't seem to separate it, right? Like they're just selling it as a thing, right? Like, so most people aren't going to buy it unless you also get like the shipping and all that for it.
Exactly. But like some countries do. I mean, we have it now here in Ireland. We have it in the UK, but we still don't have HBO. So Game of Thrones was syndicated as well. It came out on something else. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder what is the measure of success for Wheel of Time, because they're putting a lot of money into it.
I just think it's different than what people might traditionally think. You know, what would constitute success. But at least I guess my thinking is, you know, it all comes down to the show itself. But I don't think it's an issue of, well, not enough people worldwide have this streaming service right now. I think, again, I always kind of look at Game of Thrones because it's sort of the most obvious, like, you know, thing to measure it against. It's a fantasy show, and that was very popular. And you know, the point is, a lot of these people are trying to create something like that, some kind of phenomenon that catches on, that pulls in people who are not necessarily thinking of themselves as fantasy fans. And I don't think that there's an issue there with the number of subscribers worldwide overall. Maybe, in certain countries, sure, they're not going to have that market, but I still think it's more than HBO had before they.
I think it's way more than what Disney Plus had with when The Mandalorian first came out. And the thing is, I think the thing with these streaming things, it's buzz. Like, it's how much buzz does it generate for people talk about it, where it's like, you have to go and see this. And like, and that's the thing where I thought it was quite clever with them changing Tom Maryland's instruments to guitar, because like, obviously the reason why The Witcher had such a big breakout was because of the music. I am classical into The Witcher, and it was one of those things that it became like a meme, and it became like, you know, the Mandalorian, obviously, Grogu, who was Baby Yoda at the time, like, so it needs these things. So it's kind of like, what is
really? I mean, you know, I don't think Game of Thrones was immediately memed. If I don't remember it being immediately.
Not straight away, no.
Not straight away. But I mean, obviously, eventually. But I think, you know, that does help to have some kind of meme that comes out of it. You know, I think that it makes sense to try and achieve, you know, what is it that's going to get people talking about something.
Exactly.
Blue loyal is what they need.
I don't actually think, I think that could very well be right. I think loyal could absolutely be a thing that people are talking about.
Yeah. I can't wait to see him. I can't wait to see him.
I'm so excited for Loyal in the show. I can't even tell you, because I think Hamed Anamashon is just a really brilliant actor. And so I think they were so smart to cast him. And I also am just like dying to know what he's going to look like in character. I can't not picture it. I just don't know.
I can't wait.
But I think if they, you know, create this lovable character who can bring some like humor to the show, and it's something different, and you know, they really give Hamed a chance to shine. I think he could be a breakout star of the series. I really do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't wait to see the trailer, because like it seemed like it was building to something a few weeks ago and it's gone quiet again. And by the way, we're recording this on a Tuesday, and generally whenever we record on a Tuesday, something happens on the Wednesday.
All
It's
right,
happened
Wednesday.
every single time.
Oh,
So if it does, I will just do a little bit of extra and stick it on the end of the. Actually, I might just stick it in this bit. It just cuts just to me, just like something happened. But yeah, so talking of, I mean, the thing that Wheel of Time has an advantage of is that there's only one fantasy series that has sold more books than it. Now, in this kind of sphere, obviously, which is Lord of the Rings. So Wheel of Time obviously is really, really popular. There's caveats for that. Most people out of that chunk, it's the first book, because the first book of the series is always the biggest selling book. People stop reading it afterwards because they might fall away, or but you always have to start at the first book, right? So it's always going to be the biggest seller, right? And then the second caveat to that is that some people may have read it 31 years ago and never touched it again since. So that's why, you know, you're going to have to kind of bring these people into it. The Lord of the Rings doesn't have that problem, because obviously it's sold way more. There's been movies, there's been the Hobbit movies and all this kind of stuff. So we were talking before we started recording about how last week, and it's with Amazon Prime as well, so it's interesting to kind of use them as a comparison. Announced a release date and the first kind of finished post-production shot of the TV show. So, like, first of all, like, I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how Amazon are kind of treating them differently in a way. And I for my money, it's more because it's that recognition. People know what Lord of the Rings is. You can just say it's Lord of the Rings. Here's a screenshot of Lord of the Rings, and like there's Easter eggs in it for people that are well into the books and well into the lore. And for the kind of people that like the films and stuff, they can see it and it instantly looked like Lord of the Rings, which obviously with Wheel of Time, you don't have that luxury because it's like no one really knows what it looks like because we've never really seen it. But I'd like to be interested, like, because obviously there's been a lot of, let's say, unrest in the Wheel of Time community since then, because it's kind of like, why are they doing this? Why is it so secretive? So I just, Rebecca, be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, you know, when we were talking before we started recording, I think the thing that really jumped out to me is we were talking about like what is in this shot, and it being something you wouldn't, if you are following the show and know that it is covering the Second Age, that this was something surprising, not something we were expecting to see. And the way it made me sort of realize that it's not actually that different, because I think that this shot is really for probably the you know, most hardcore Tolkien fans out there who are really into all of the lore and the history and would be able to recognize what's going on there. And that's, as you said, it does have the advantage of, well, everyone knows what Lord of the Rings is. Even if you've never read any Tolkien, you know what it is, you know generally what it looks like. And so you can just look at that beautiful shot and say, hey, that looks like Lord of the Rings. And so it can appeal to that side of people who might be interested in the show, but it also probably primarily would appeal to people who really love Tolkien because of the specifics of what's in it. And in that sense, it is more for those. And I think that's what we've seen from the Wheel of Time, all those little sneak peeks that we've gotten so far. It's just for fans of the books. They haven't done anything yet that's really for broadly marketing the show. I mean, the poster is, I guess, the first thing that can be said to be not necessarily specifically for book fans. It is, but it isn't probably the main thing they're going to be using. It's just we've gotten to see it probably because it tied in with the book cover, and you know, so it's out there. But everything else has been entirely just extras for book fans. It's not, they're not doing marketing yet. Mm-hmm. And so it's similar in that way. But as to the difference in like the dates and why they have this date for Lord of the Rings and they don't have a specific date for Wheel of Time. I mean, I think it's just because it's so far away that they can, right? Like, I think they picked a date that they wanted to pick for whatever reasons, but it's over a year away. So at that point, they know they're going to be done. They can have the show out at any point. So they just picked a date they liked. I think with The Wheel of Time, probably there's still some work being done on season 1, I suspect.
Yeah.
And so, or at least has been recently. And so they don't want to tie themselves to a very firm date, you know, while things are still, it's very close. And there's no real need to, other than to just satisfy us fans who want to plan our lives around it. But we're going to watch the show no matter when it is. People who are paying this much attention now will watch it whenever. Doesn't matter. And the people who really need to know, they need to get that information out there and have it stick in people's minds, are going to be the people that haven't really heard much about the show yet, or anything about the show, that they're going to want to appeal to with a trailer, which should probably come out sometime soon-ish, and that'll have a specific date in it, you know. But as for when that trailer will come out, I think from my own research, it's like 2 to 3 months max, you know, before the premiere of the show. So this where we are right now, we're in August. This is literally the earliest they would ever release a trailer, and it wouldn't be unreasonable. It might be a month from now or so.
Yeah, I reckon it really depends on when it's coming out in November, because I think that's one of the things as well. They've not quite decided when exactly November it's going to be. I think they were probably thinking, I know John at What Up was pretty kind of adamant that he was hearing Black Friday, but Thanksgiving. But I think because The Witcher then was like, we're coming out start of December, the Amazon kind of thing, because that's one of the things with Lord of the Rings. You can say it's like with movies, like a Marvel movie, they'll say we're coming out on this date, and other things will move around because of it, because like, we don't want to be near this, we need to move away.
Other things will move around the Lord of the Rings show maybe, but they're not going to move around the Wheel of Time because it's an unknown.
It's unknown, yeah, exactly. So they kind of probably looking at when The Witcher was coming, when the Book of Boba Fett is coming on Disney Plus, when other things are coming in there that they want, because it seems pretty likely they're going to be doing, even if they do 2 episodes on the first day, it's going to be weekly from that. So they probably want to give it enough space where it's not, the last few episodes aren't going to run into something else that's big and binge.
Or particularly you want to at least be able to capture people's interest with the first half of the season before it's really competing with anything major. I think. Exactly. Bound to be some overlap with something, but better that it's like the end of the show when maybe people are already kind of hooked in.
Yeah, because you'll want to watch, if you've watched the first 6, you're going to want to watch the last 2, like, unless you hate it, right? But in my view, 6 of them, you get to the 6th episode, you're like, this is too much for me. But like, so I think that's probably part of it. And then with the trailer, I think, you're right, because I've seen some of your research that you've been doing on your channel. And by the way, if you've the channel details will below. If you're not already subscribed to Rebecca's channel, do so. It's normally 2 to 3 months, and 3 months is generally the way. So if it's early November, I think we'll get it first week of September. And if it's, I think it will literally be like a certain number of weeks before it. I can't see it being this month. I'd be very, very surprised.
I think more likely September, and let's say that they're gonna, premiere in middle of November, then it'll probably be middle of September. Maybe they'll even pick September 16th when, it's kind of a, a day in the fandom. That's when they started filming initially. And Robert Jordan's passing and all that. So, I think around then, honestly, but that doesn't mean we won't hear anything from them in between, because, there might be some other stuff that they can kind of, tease us with as they're getting towards it. But I think the fandom that might be feeling restless now because it's a lull, once we get into that, it's going to be like a major push, and there's going to be stuff all over the place and all the time. So I think we're going to get that, and it's going to be like a extravaganza, but we just have to wait a little longer before that begins.
Sure, and as well, we're probably going to start getting some casting announcements for season 2, because there's a few of them that have kind of slipped through by the looks of things.
About that, because I really missed when they would like do an announcement, and like Rafe Judkins would say something about the actors, and I wondered, if they're holding off because like these would be season 2 announcements yet, and we haven't even seen season 1. But I would love that. If we could get, I think that would definitely excite fans and keep us from,
and two because there was the I can't remember the actress's name. Coveney is a surname, isn't it? Who's people are kind of convinced. Yes, yeah. The people are kind of convinced that she's playing Elaine because she's been pictured on set with. And it was I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but a few of the actors took a selfie and that had all the names on there, like we're back on set, and this person was there who just looked like Elaine.
And then it was Priyanka Bose who had posted it, and then she just deleted it really quickly. So that was, I think, really what kind of like tripped people, triggered people to like, oh, she wasn't supposed to have posted that. So like this Kira Coveney person might be like a big secret. She's not just like, I don't know, more likely a bigger part than a bit part. Otherwise, maybe they don't care.
So like, hopefully we'll start getting some stuff speeded up. But back onto before we talk about the Dragon Reborn, let's not forget. So Chris hasn't seen this. You should go and see this picture of the Lord of the Rings thing. But were you excited by this? Because I have to say I was afterwards I was kind of thinking about it because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. And the Silmarillion as well. Like I love the Silmarillion, even though it's just like kind of an encyclopedia really, or a history of something. I do love it. I was thinking that this is I would have been pleased to see anything, but this is the only thing they could have done where I was like, wow, I'm so excited about this.
Yeah. So I am more of a different, I think, category of Lord of the Rings fan than you guys, because I mean, I've read The Lord of the Rings, I've read The Hobbit, I've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, I've seen the animated Hobbit movie, and I saw the first like live action Hobbit movie. That's it. And I've listened to like radio productions and stuff like that. So like those are the things like I've maybe consumed more than like a totally casual fan, but I've not read beyond the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Because I'm not as huge of a Tolkien nerd as some people might be. But I honestly, I love it. And I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I was very disappointed with the Hobbit movie, the first one. And I didn't watch beyond that because I disliked it so much that I'm like, I'm not going to spend my time watching the other two. I don't know how you guys feel about them, but that was my reaction. So I am interested to see the Lord of the Rings show, and I will watch it. But I am not hyped because I just am very cautious about, I guess, expanding into like territory that doesn't have much of a narrative, right? Like we're trying to create a narrative out of something that does not exist, right? The Hobbit is a very slim narrative, and I felt the problem was trying to stretch it into a much bigger thing that created what made me not like it. And you can sort of just create in the world, and maybe it'll be great, maybe it'll be really interesting, but it doesn't have a built-in narrative to draw on, so it just depends what they do. And so I'm just not hyped, so we'll see.
No, it's a good point, because like if it was, and I mean that's why it kind of excited me that there was like I keep saying and reading first stage stuff, but it was like it's pre-first stage, it's even before that. I was kind of encouraged to see that, because you're right, with the second age stuff that's in the Silmarillion that they're drawing off, it's very, very threadbare. It's almost like a wiki, not to say it's like a Wikipedia article, but it kind of is, because it's just like, these are the lists of people that were kings in Numenor. This is what happened at this point, this is what happened. And it's like, there's events that happened. The other thing as well, these events that happened that are probably going to be in the TV show happened over thousands of years, right? Even in the second age. So like when, spoilers for the Silmarillion and maybe the TV show, when Numenor sank, it was like thousands of years later when the last alliance of elves and men happened, right? So there's a lot of different things, but with the pre-first stage and first stage stuff, there is more of a narrative there. You have like the children of Hurin, you have the fall of Gondolin, you have you know, the Dagger Brackalak and all this kind of stuff. So that there is more stuff there, but what we were led to believe was that was off the table. It wasn't allowed to be done. And I think what they've done is gone back and they've paid more money to the Tolkien estate to be like, can we use this? And can we use this and this and this? Which is again, I don't like Amazon have got so much money, like just make them pay. Right?
Well, I mean, the Tolkien estate is also notoriously greedy in a way. I mean, they do like their money.
You know,
Well,
some people
they like
say,
their money and they don't like what they get for it, apparently.
No, maybe that's also they're greedy and they're very sour, disappointed. They don't
They
like it.
hated the movies, or at least Christopher Tolkien did. I don't know how everyone felt about it.
But I think Christopher Tolkien hates everything. I think he even hated his own book that he wrote. Since he never wrote
maybe that's it. Maybe he does just hate everything. So I'm not going to get too in a fuss about it. But
no, that's right. Because the thing with Christopher Tolkien as well, because like the Silmarillion is his version of it, and there's like Tolkien purists that are like, this is wrong. This is not what J.R. Tolkien would have done with the Silmarillion, right? So it's just a bit of a but you say greedy. The nice thing is say protective is the nice thing.
Right? Right.
I don't think
like I said, I'm not that category of a fan, so I'm not. That's not what bothers me. Like I said, I just didn't think the Hobbits movies were good movies.
No, they weren't. No, they weren't. They were. I think most people. I don't think you're saying anything. Don't be worried.
No, I'm not. I know some people love them, but I'm not. I know I'm not alone in my opinion. But
yeah. It was just it would have been fine as one movie, maybe two at a stretch. Maybe. But like I think what happened was, I mean, I've kind of watched all the documentaries and stuff. I kind of know the reason why it became 3 films, and basically all the stuff that. Not even stuff that would have ended up in the extended versions of the films. It was extra stuff that would never have seen the light of day, had to go into the films to kind of have them out a little bit. Yeah, it was an absolute nightmare, apparently. But that's it doesn't happen with the Wheel of Time.
Well, they don't have that problem, right? They're not trying to pad anything out to get extra seasons out of it, so we can at least be thankful about that.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
Yeah.
Well, should we? Because we actually started this. This was actually a sidetrack discussion because we were going to talk about why I didn't like Perrin.
Your favorite
book. Right.
But no, I mean, really, let's just jump in and it'll resolve itself. The reason why I don't like Perrin.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously, it's we get some Perrin, we get some Rand, and we get the girls in this stretch of chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like it was last time we did this. We got everybody. Well, we also get Matt, obviously, in this one, and we start kind of where we ended it with their with the Aielman that is trapped in a cage.
Gaul.
Yes.
How do they pronounce his name in the audiobook? Is it Gaul?
Gaul.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. 1 syllable. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
This thing is, I always kind of, especially after that Moiraine thing the other day, I'm just second guessing myself about everything now. I'm like, is this how I've been saying this for 20 odd years? Like,
this is just, in my opinion, that's just the Wheel of Time fandom. Like, that's a given that we will argue about how to pronounce things.
Yes, it's fun. What did you think of this one? What do you think? I mean, we're starting to get a little bit more into the Ale people. How do you feel about this point, Chris?
Well, I mean, I was very torn because, I mean, on one hand, stuff is actually starting to happen for the first time in this book. That we get some action scenes. I mean, especially when Gaul and Perrin are killing White Cloaks, for instance. And there are other scenes. Matt fights a little bit, doesn't he? No, it's a little bit. And then when we have the Ale maidens or maidens of the spear, the Ale women, they also fight a little bit. So there's a little action here. Actually, probably a little bit more action than we've seen
in this book.
In the whole series up until this point.
Yeah.
It's very David Gemmell in this part. And even Rand gets into it and fights. So there's a lot of fighting going on in these, and so that I like that part. I like that there was a little bit of action. But I think I came away from these chapters again thinking, wow, very little seems to be happening here. I mean, it's the same. They're trapped. The girls get trapped again. This time by men instead of other women. And yeah, and the whole, you know, Matt and Perrin part, nothing really happens to them. It's mostly what happens to the girls. That's the more interesting part for once. But otherwise, I think it's dull. This book just trudges along and nothing happens.
Super interesting to me that you're saying that. I think because I just reread it recently, and I'm really rereading it, right? Like I've read it multiple times before, so it's such a different experience. I think there's so much that we can't really get into because it's spoilers for later on, but it's very different on a reread, I think, because you realize how much is being like set up in this book. And I found this book like a breeze to read, this most recent reread. Like I just like plowed right through it. And so I didn't find it tedious at all, but I know where some of these things are going, and you know where some of the characters are going, and so it's just very different experience, I guess.
I think that's a little dangerous, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because obviously, as a new reader, and I do know that a lot of people drop the series here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mostly because people want to, you know, are used to reading trilogies or whatever. But I mean, a lot of them drop because, and I can understand why. And also, it's the kind of old adage of if you're not into it,
Mm-hmm.
drop it. If it doesn't hold your interest, let it go, because then it's not for you.
Right.
This wasn't meant for you. It doesn't mean that it's bad, but it's not for you. It's like they say. I mean, we were taught when I studied literature, if a short story doesn't capture you within like the first 10 pages or whatever the short story might be, then let it go. Mm-hmm. If you're not into the book after the first 2 chapters, let it go, because then it's not for you. Which I always think is kind of interesting, because a lot of people say when they tell you, see Breaking Bad, but the first season is no good. It doesn't get better until the second season. Why would I jump in? Why would I wait for the second season? The first season should be good.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand your point, saying that you know where it's going, but for somebody like me who doesn't know where it's going, then this isn't interesting.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm saying it's really interesting. But I think it also, like, you brought up a good point about how like the girls get captured again, and there's some sort of like repetitiveness to that narrative. And I think that's a really good point. And I've made that specific argument about the TV show. I think we talked about this last time, maybe. About how like books 2 and 3 really need to be merged, because there is so many similarities in like the overall narrative structure between the 2 books that you really can't get away with doing it. And you especially can't get away with doing it back to back in a TV show. Like in a single season, you can't do the plot of book 2 and then the plot of book 4 or book 3. You'd be like, we just did that like a couple episodes ago. So why are we doing it?
Yeah.
So
why are the characters doing the exact same thing again?
Yeah.
Which in a way can work, because I think we talked about this when we discussed the first book, is that, or when we were going into, because I think I think it was the first book, when there are things that happen again, even in the first book, there's repetitiveness, which I just kind of took as, when I read it the first time, that I just figured was the wheel of time.
Yeah.
That's why things just happen over and over again, because that's the pattern of the wheel. So I figured, but now after the Great Hunt, which was great, then this becomes, you know, reading this afterwards becomes tiring, because you're thinking that it's going to keep that pace.
I think like from my point of view of this one, like I do like the Dragon Reborn a lot, and I think that a lot of that goes down to the ending, which I think the last maybe 8 chapters are probably my favorite. It's probably my favorite ending of any of, well, not any of them, but particularly in the first three anyways. But I prefer the ending of the Dragon Reborn to the Great Hunt. I think it's just a better ending because all the characters have stuff to do. It's quite like, you know, fist pumping, and it's like all this stuff, and it's funny as well because, you know, Matt has a big part to play in it, which is, as it's coming up now, is getting more involved. But it's interesting. This is the first time that I've reread this book since, like, you know, getting into kind of like publishing myself and everything like that. And it's the way that he kind of structures this book is we talked about it last time, and this is the kind of problem that Chris was having with it at the start, was how there's more POVs in this book than any of the other previous Wheel of Time books, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But he, at the start of the book, he was blocking them all together. So you'd have like 6 chapters of Perrin,
Right.
6 chapters of the girls, because he kind of moves around, and then you'd have another chunk of Perrin, and then because the reason is because it's a very kind of linear book, and there's certain characters that are out of action until a certain part of the story. So I think the first parts of the book really needed a little bit more brevity, I suppose, and it really needed someone like how Matt is in the end of the book. But he's obviously resting and recovering from healing, and obviously Rand is on the move, so he's not in the book. So what with the previous 2 books that we've had in the series, you have most of the characters are moving somewhere to do something, or if you have like one static set of characters, everyone else is moving around them to go and achieve something. In this book, most of the characters are static for most of the story, the first kind of half of the book. So you've got Matt is in Tar Valon, the girls are all in Tar Valon, Perrin and Moraine are kind of just moving very, very slowly. Actually, no, in the first 6 chapters, they're just in the one place for the first 6 chapters. So it's all kind of very kind of, because it's, well, I think that's the nature of the book as well, because it's building into this big kind of thing as well. So I wonder, like, because obviously then later on, I'm trying to say this without any kind of spoilers for you, Chris. Later on in the book, there's a similar scenario where there's like, it's called the style of writing is called a time bomb, where it's kind of like this is going to happen, and then the rest of the book is like a countdown to this thing that's going to happen, right? So one of the books deals with this again, this kind of thing, and then the next book afterwards is the characters that weren't mentioned in that book what was happening at the same time. And the answer is that not much was happening at the same time, right? So it's, and Robert Jordan actually like said himself after that book, he was like, he tried to do something, it didn't work as well as he was expecting to do. And I wonder if that's was an answer to this one, because I have seen people that do love this book, and I see people that really don't. Out of the first 3, generally most people's favorite is The Great Hunt, and then you kind of have some people that like The Eye of the World, and then the Dragon Reborn and The Eye of the World. And it seems to be, this book seems to get a greater reaction of dislike compared to the other ones. And a part of that is also Perrin, because people either love Perrin or they don't love Perrin. And I think, you know, this is the most early Wheel of Time Perrin book that there is as well. Why is it you don't like Perrin? Let's get into.
Well, we can get into it, and I think while we get into it, we can also talk about his chapters here, because that's, I mean, one of the reasons. I mean, obviously he frees the Yeoman, and they have a little bit of a back and forth. Obviously, the Yeoman knows more about Perrin than Perrin knows about himself, kind of thing, felt like. And then after that, we get, now I can't remember how they pronounce it. Fail or Folly?
Fail.
That's what I said, yeah. She comes in, and they have a kind of back and forth, and he doesn't really know what to make of her. She's hunting the horn. She wants the horn. She just decides to join the rest of the group as they board a ship. They run away and board a ship. There's some fun parts here about with Loyal, though, that he's lying in between 2 beds and stuff like that. That's kind of like interesting. I think that's kind of funny. And I mean that would make for a great meme. That image of him sitting between 2 beds and not really fitting. So that's kind of fun. And they talk about Songwood and stuff like that. But I think here, because Perrin, when he gets into it with Fael, and she talks about, then she tries to explain things to him, and he's just like, I'm not a little kid that needs stuff explained to me. And I was just like, but that's what you show throughout this book, that's exactly what you are.
I think you may be the first person in the history of Wheel of Time reading that is defending Fael at any point.
No, I think she has a point. I think she's kind of cool.
Some big Fael defenders.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
We had a whole conversation about it on the Black Tower podcast. So if you want a really big Fael defender, you got to talk to Rakappa Sadai.
Oh yeah. Oh, there you go. You can become friends there, Chris. And
We'll become friends.
To be fair to Fael, at this point, like, I mean, it is kind of funny. I think you are supposed to kind of laugh at her that she's like hunting for the horn and it's already been found. Yeah. But her instincts are good because she's kind of like, I think that you guys may find it. Like, well, you know, so
I'll just hang with you.
She's
give her some credit.
You know, that's a smart instinct that she has. She's not wrong.
Yeah, she's not wrong.
No, and then Perrin enters the Wolf Dream, you know, kind of again, he goes into, and this was interesting because we're first time we see an interaction with Balsamon and somebody else. So this I liked. I mean, this was good. I mean, I liked those Balsamon parts, that dream sequence, how he's described, how he's kind of slightly described differently each time, but he's still, and I think people may be excited about seeing if Loyal is going to be blue or not in the show, but I want to see what they do with Balsamon because I think they can get and if you've seen, because I know David, you saw the Justice League, the Snyder cut, and I'm thinking kind of like they do a dark side kind of thing.
I don't know. I'm very. I love the dream sequences in the Eye of the World. I think it's probably part of my favorite parts of the books. I really of that book. But I've made my peace with the fact that they're not going to be in the TV show.
Yeah,
I hope we get something of dreams eventually, but I am also in the camp of expecting not to get much, if anything, in the first season.
So we're not going to see Balsamon in the first.
I think we
season?
might not. I if I had to bet, I would say no. But it also could be a thing where they decide to sort of keep it as a surprise. So you never know. But I wouldn't be upset if they kind of hold him for the second season. I think he needs to be in the second season.
Yeah, definitely. I've kind of done it. I've kind of quashed my hopes because I'm kind of like, it's not. I'm telling myself it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
with the little inkling where it's like it might be a surprise.
Yeah, that's the same. I think that's the safer way to think about it, and that's generally what I think too. But I think he'll be in the second season. So like this scene that is in this chapter, like you said, it's interesting. You get to see him. He's not just like haranguing Perrin. He's like he's talking to Lanfear. It's interesting.
Yeah, Lanfear. Yeah, Lanfear's back, and this is the first time that she calls him Ishmael in this one, isn't it? It's the first time in the books that he's actually referred to as Ishmael.
Does she? I don't even remember that, but I mean, I think there's been like hints about that, but yeah, that might be the first.
The first kind of one, because obviously, like I think in the second book, someone says that I think it might be Loyal that says that Balsamon is what the Trollocs called Ishmael. I think, isn't it?
Could be.
I remember because when I did the Great Hunt reread on my channel, what I remember is that there were enough clues that you could piece it together in the Great Hunt, but it was absolutely not specifically said outright. And actually, I'm kind of like looking at this now because I don't even remember her calling him Ishmael at this point. But it certainly does become more explicit in this book. I just didn't remember it being or using that name.
But I mean, what's interesting here is the back and forth between them, and that there's like she's not just intrinsically afraid of him.
Yes,
that she sees herself as being on his level, and she also says, "This is my domain."
Right. That is very, very interesting. Yeah.
And so that's the fun part.
You'll come to know about the Forsaken. They all of them like to try and claim that Tel Aran Riyadh is their domain.
Yeah.
A few of them
A lot of
stake
people
a
do
claim
that.
for it.
Well,
By the way,
this is
I'm
this
looking
is
at the pages. I don't think she does. I don't think she uses the name of Shamael. I don't think
I
she
may
calls
be,
my name at
I
all.
may be remembering something a little bit later on.
Yeah. Again, I think you, if you were really paying attention, but mainly on a reread, you know, really, it'd be hard the first time around. You could piece it together in The Great Hunt. And I think at some point in this book, it's more clear, but yeah, it's still, you know, he's not coming right out with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then Perrin meets up with Rand, who almost ends up killing him, like again, which also happened. Like last time we did these chapters, I think is exactly the same thing happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Perrin
tries to
and
kill.
Rand.
Yeah. He's just killing everyone that comes near him in his dreams at the minute.
Yeah.
Which he actually does at the end of this chapter, where we get a little Rand point of view, where he just slaughters a bunch of dark friends.
Yes.
They come there with their horses and try to be regular friends, but they're actually dark friends.
Yeah, one of them was a great man.
I wanted to ask, like, what your thoughts are on Rand in this book, like whatever Rand we do get, and also just like the lack of Rand generally.
Well, actually, because we had this discussion when we first started this book, because it's called The Dragon Reborn, but the dragon is not in the book that much. And also we were talking about, but then we did, like, I think earlier when we talked about the Bechdel test, where the girls, all they do is talk about where is Rand, and stuff like that. But actually, I think it's a very good move. I like the fact that he's a side character in this, and they're all kind of like, it still revolves around him, but I think it's a very shrewd move to make, and it's a very bold move to make in the third book.
Yeah.
And maybe that could also be one of the reasons why people maybe drop this book. I mean, drop the series after this, because it's just like, you know what happened to the main character? He just kind of up and
What do you think about his like mental state?
I mean, it is obvious. I mean, there's, when I look for like cover photos for each episode for the podcast, I mean, obviously I just Google like the Dragon Reborn and the images, and I mean the fun part is that most of the images of Rand that people have done, you know, illustrations, fan drawings, or whatever, is him dark and brooding, very Morrissey like, I would say. And you know, just staring into the abyss. And I think I like that. I like that kind of like being on the edge. And I think it's also very shrewd, because you don't want, I mean, for Robert Jordan not to cast him into, you know, a fit of madness right away, or describe that. I think you get to sense it as a reader instead, and I think that's very well done.
Yeah,
you know,
not having as much of his POV makes it, you're more likely to really question, like, well, how mad is he, and like, what, you know,
is he okay?
Is he okay?
Yeah. And that's by doing little snippets of him, and especially when he, you know, kills a bunch of people, then leaves them kneeling around the tree. You're kind of thinking, that has he gone mad? Because obviously at the start of the book, like he's and throughout the book, you've told, like, you know, the any male channeler is gonna go insane. And so when you're just kind of coming back into him and seeing these little acts that he's doing, like, you understand him defending himself, but then, you know, the things that he's doing afterwards, like how he's leaving these bodies and how he's kind of doing this. But obviously it kind of all ties together later on in the book. But it's quite an effective way of doing it. But he's basically the MacGuffin of the story, isn't he? And this is the thing. And this is the thing that I was trying to get at before. Like, you have this MacGuffin, which is Rand, which is like, we need to find Rand, but then the characters take a long time to move to go and try and find him.
Really, the only one that seems to care is Perrin, because he's the only one that really seems to have like Rand in the forefront of his mind, because Matt doesn't care.
Yeah,
he just likes walking around doing his thing. And I mean, they obviously,
you know, throw out there that, like, you know, because Rand is Taviran, and they, well, you know, that he is somewhat, you know, that is affecting like who's more directly, you know, interacting with him. Like, who does he need at that moment? Who is the person who is most strongly pulled to follow Rand?
Yes.
Aaron seems to be that person right now.
Exactly. And that's an interesting thing as well, because I often think about that as like, it's because of, I always think it's because of the dream aspect. And that's why Egwene's having a lot of dreams about him too, is because he's getting assailed in his dreams, basically. That's why he's attacking people whenever they appear in his dreams. It's because like they're trying to do this way. So, and obviously with Perrin, because he's so strong in the world of dreams, like that's his nature, is trying to get Perrin to come near him, or even when he's sleeping to come and protect him, like because he needs it. So yeah, it's quite an interesting way around things, because obviously then we go into Egwene's point of view.
Yeah,
and she has.
Because now we're back. Yeah, now we're back to the girls as they travel downriver, just as Aes Sedai, basically.
Yep.
And then because I said Egwene has a lot of dreams. And if I remember correctly, because now it feels like I read this a while back, that she kind of just recaps all the Matt, what's been happening with Matt, the gray man, the man who isn't there, stuff like that, and so basically we get like her version of the things that have happened in chapters past, kind of like a recap, but her interpretation and what she doesn't understand, and she's trying to inform them about that.
Right, like she's dreaming of, you know, Perrin and a falcon, and we kind of know what that's about because we just saw that. Yeah, and
even though, and there's a back, you know, Min was telling Perrin about a falcon, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on
from Min too. So a lot of times with like important things, you're gonna get some of that from multiple sources, like Min, like Egwene. There are other, you know, sources of people who can give that kind of clue.
Yeah. And then their ship just runs aground, and they gotta walk it. They gotta walk it to the.
With the dreams as well, there's a few things that may or may not be foreshadowing in there too.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything that jumps out at you out of the things that she dreams about that you're like, that's interesting?
Or Min's viewings, for that matter, because those are real.
No, nothing like. I was actually more focused on what had happened. You know, what really caught me was actually her that I liked a lot. The whole gray man thing, that she's like, this whole like how she described Matt's interaction with the gray man, somebody who wasn't there but was still there. She didn't quite understand it, and I think that I got caught up in that a lot, because I did really enjoy that part, how it was worded. But yeah, no specific things that I thought about.
If you're interested in the gray man, there was actually, it might have been in the chapter that you guys talked about last week, actually, or last time actually, but like, because there was some other clues recently about like gray man also from Perrin's perspective.
Yeah, because he talked about like a person that he had seen that he didn't, and Matt talks about it too, a little bit. But yeah, in the episode we did before that, when he interacts with it.
There's a lot of them knocking around at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, it's interesting. They introduced gray men like not that long ago, but all of a sudden there's a bunch of them.
Yeah,
hanging around.
The first one is in the first few chapters of The Great Hunt.
Yeah, they were last.
You were talking about that.
Yeah, and you missed that actually. You didn't realize it was a great man, did you? But because it's not been specified what it was.
It's hard to know what that is at that point.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting, because when they decide to walk it, obviously this is a way to get some more interaction, because if they were on the boat the whole time, we wouldn't get what we're going to get next. Which is interesting, because in my work, my current fantasy work in progress that I'm doing, I do a similar thing, because I have characters that are going to take a boat. It'd be just easiest to get to the next harbor boat, but then they get attacked by pirates and they have to kind of walk it anyway, and that's how they end up into trouble. Right. So, and that was the plan even before I read this part. So I can't say I stole it.
All right, okay. But the thing is with fantasy writing, right, is that it's like, how do you solve the travel aspect?
Yeah,
that's the thing, right? If a fantasy series goes on long enough, something happens where traveling becomes like this, right? Because
Yeah.
like we just can't have these people traveling all the time, right?
But I think using waterways is actually a really good way to get around it. I mean, without using magic or anything like that, waterways is actually quite a good, because I use that in my current work in progress, where they basically there's just channels that run all around in that world, where they can take like barges, and there's locks systems and stuff like that they use. I figured that was, instead of using magic, that was a good way to do it.
Yeah, I do the same in Solitude Shadow as well. It's like
Yeah.
use a boat one, but I think it comes from, it must just come from Lord of the Rings, because like when they're like, what's the best way of, which should have occurred to them a long time before. It's like, what's the best way to get down to the south? Go on a boat.
Yes, exactly.
It's the best way
I
of
think
doing
it comes from the wind and the willows, actually.
The wind and the willows, right?
Done that more on later seasons of Game of Thrones, instead of just being like, well, that happened. They just zipped from there to there.
Everybody took a dragon there.
It was so
Well,
fast.
some of them had dragons, not everybody.
They were so fast at traveling at the end of that season. Because
But it's the
I
same.
remember, because I started rewatching it a while ago, and I actually got to like, I think season 7, and I was like, the rest of it is fresh enough, so I don't have to watch anymore. But like season 2 is when Brianna Tarth is bringing Jaime Lannister back to King's Landing, and it lasts pretty much the whole season.
The whole season, right? Yeah.
Them traveling down, and in the next and these later seasons, it's just like people are just zooming and appearing all over the place.
Right. That was, yeah, it was
Which is fine. I mean, it's fine, but it's like it's the consistency of doing it. It's like, what is the, like, it has to be consistent, and that's like the good thing about, and this is another thing for Chris to bear in mind as we're ending the Dragon Reborn and going into the Shadow Rising. Traveling's about to change in a big way. Right?
Yep.
So yeah, he's paused again. He's having a little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's taking a little nap, it looks like.
Wake up, Chris. So
He started thinking about Perrin, and then he just.
Oh man, I know. So what do you think about while we're waiting for him to reappear? What do you think of this book up to this point? Because obviously Chris isn't having a great time with it. I quite like it, but I can see a few kind of structural things. Aside from the fact that when we talk about it from the TV point of view, where we'd have to kind of restructure it, what are your thoughts on the Dragon Reborn up to this point?
So I also, like I said, especially on reread, I really enjoy it, but and I don't remember having any issue with it when I first read it, although that was just many years ago now. So who knows, but so I don't have that issue, but at the same time, I definitely recognize the structural similarities and the reasons why that is not ideal. I remember, and this is something that it still bugs me. It's like both times when like the girls were like, they're in the tower for like a month that we don't even see, and then is like, as soon as we get to them in the tower, they're like, oh, we got to leave again. And so I remember reading that part and being like, okay, so why do we even go back to the tower? It was that bugged me a little bit when I first read it, I think. And so but I don't have the problem with reading Perrin's perspective, and that might be something that other people struggle with. I don't mind that, but he is he's a different kind of voice, because he is someone that the thing that we are really meant to understand about him is that he just thinks a lot. He considers things a lot. He doesn't just act. He really is cautious in some ways. So, but on the other hand, he's willing to do things like bust an Aielman out of a cage and kill White Cloaks if he has to. So I think that's important to kind of realize about Perrin as another aspect of his character. Like, he thought that through, right? He knew what he was getting into when he did that. He did not do that on a whim. But you do have to like sort of deal with that introspective, he's not gonna rush into a lot of things, but at the same time, he's not he is willing to do more drastic things like that, which most people would not do. So, but it is a challenge. He's a very interior character.
Yeah. Well, what I think is interesting about, and we touched on it last time, Chris, that this book is because we do have the multiple POVs running through this book, compared to, I mean, like Great Hunt has a little bit of Perrin every so often, it has a little bit of Egwene every so often, but I think it's something like 75% is Rand. Obviously, Eye of the World is about 90% is Rand. You get like kind of one flavor of the story, whereas with this one, like the Perrin storyline is kind of almost verging into grimdark at some points, because it's like very kind of like, you have like quite a bit of action, quite a lot of like gritty kind of goings on, people that are like in cages and all this kind of stuff. You have the girl's storyline, which is kind of like obviously you have that high fantasy with the magic, but it's almost like a mystery thing going on as well, because they're kind of they're going off to do this. And then you have Matt, which is when he arrives into the story, is very kind of rogue like.
We were talking sword and sorcery almost.
Yeah, it's like three different flavors. It's like basically three different subgenres of fantasy rolled into the same book. And I can see that why someone may like yourself may struggle with the pacing with that, because it's three different types, like kind of you go from one to the, and at this stage, at this part of the book, he doesn't really kind of stay with one character too long either, so he's kind of moving around quite a bit, because he wants to kind of get them all to somewhere in the story at the kind of the same time. So, but I kind of like it, because I like that kind of different kind of flavor of stuff that you're getting through with the story at this point. And this brings us into meeting the Aiel as well, which is like, we have hints of them in the previous book. We have hints of them in Perrin's chapters, and now they're here.
I mean, I like that about this book, but like it also, again, like in the first read, there is a lot of it, it's like, okay, we're just meeting a new character. Like there could be, perhaps a little bit of, there's a lot of that in a row. So maybe.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that when they, well, I mean, obviously we've had them before, the Aiel, but now that it's like kind of like, okay, so now we're getting introduced, and fairly late in the story, we're getting introduced to a whole kind of like new culture, because we're delving into the culture in a deeper way than we've done before, and you're kind of wondering, why are we doing this so late in the book? What is the end game here? I mean, and probably for somebody, if you were reading this when these books came out, and you were uncertain that there was going to be a sequel to it, another book coming out, then you're kind of wondering what is happening here, because I mean, you also have to look at it from that perspective, as readers who read it while the books are going on. You don't know that it's setting up maybe for something later in other books or farther down along in the series. Then I think probably a lot of people who became lapsed Wheel of Time readers probably were the ones that were reading them as the books were coming out, and they were just like, you know what, I don't know, this doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. But I mean, the Aiel they're interesting because it seems like they have a very rich culture. They have a very deep culture. And I mean, they talk about a lot of things. They have their own lore. It's obvious that they're looking for Rand, as they were talking about, he who comes with the dawn. I mean, it's no secret, maybe, that's what they're looking for, or the dragon.
They're not calling him the Dragon Reborn, so they're not looking for the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah. No. But I mean, it's to us, the readers, maybe it's more obvious, whereas maybe it's not as obvious to the characters.
No, but it goes to your point about how they have their own lore, right?
Yeah.
Like, because they have this other, thing they're calling him. It's pretty obvious who they're talking about, but they're calling him something else that we haven't heard before. So that is all, that comes from their lore.
We have that hint in the second book as well, when Matt come across. And they're talking about looking for. Did they use the Caracan? Is it they're using that at that point? They say the Caracan.
I think they might. Yeah, I think they might use that. They're using them interchangeably.
And then Perrin's like, and Matt are thinking, but they're talking about Rand, aren't they? You can say that way.
It was immediately obvious to them who they were looking for.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the fun part here, the good part here in this is that it's not as much of an info dump as we've seen in other instances, like when, for some reason, very talkative captains like to talk about what the world looks like, because that's basically how Robert Jordan pushes, sets up background stories.
Very talkative farmers who drive carts and things like
stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's always
endlessly talking, but it's easier when there's more than one character from that background, because you can see them interact with each other, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've learned throughout my writings, how to build up kind of the story, the background story through a discussion between several characters.
Yeah, exactly, and that's also. But just about your point about where they've come into the story, the ale in a big way. Again, this is the thing that's the larger problem with when we the Great Hunt and the Dragon Reborn and then put them into a TV show, is that the ale are kind of introduced around the same time as the Sean Chan are in the second, in like a major way, when you finally get to kind of meet them, interact with them. It's probably within the same, if you went to word count, it's probably within the same kind of ballpark. Word count, and that's just that whole kind of repetitive. I can't say that word. The nature of these two kind of books, where it's they mirror each other very closely. But I also think as well is I also think the reason why it does repeat quite a lot is because I think this one was written quite quickly, but I think in the background of his working, he nailed down a lot of things of what he wanted to do with the future books, which was still kind of up in the air a little bit in the previous two, especially the first one. But even with The Great Hunt, there were some aspects of it where he was kind of still unsure of where he was going to go. But in this one, I think he was like, right, I can see this is the progression where I need to do, and these people need to do this, and these people need to do that. And I think he just kind of fell back into this kind of. It's kind of like, I mean, you'll agree, Rebecca. This is the last one that's kind of has a formula to it, because of the next, particularly 3 books are wildly different to each other when of how they interact. Yeah.
You can kind of think of the first 6 books as like 2 trilogies, and yes, I totally agree that there is a definite sort of formula, especially to books 2 and 3, and book 4 is very different. Book 5 is very different. Book 6 is very different. Like they're all very different books. So you kind of have that to look forward to, and there is lots of setup. That's where there's always some risk to that, right? That setup needs to be done, but it isn't always as engaging as it could be.
I mean, what I wanted to say before is that when they talk about what the Aiel are in their culture is all done through this, as Nynaeve is a healing Dalin.
I agree. It's pretty nice.
Like that. I think that's well done. Yeah. What is, to your point, David, is that I think Egwene basically says this basically has happened before. We don't want to get trapped again by women. It's like this already happened to us. We kind of have to be careful. And then it actually does happen to them when they've healed Dalin. They get ambushed and are kidnapped by bandits who try to sell them to the Murderall.
Yes.
So there's a little more action. There's more action, and this, I mean, if you want to put a subcategory to this, is more of like an adventure story at this point. It's more like The Last of the Mohicans.
Yeah, it is, because like the Ale do have that kind of aspect to their culture. Obviously, they're all supposed to look Irish, and they live in a desert, which is, I would burst into flames if I was
right.
I'd just literally step out and I'd be gone to be like a pile of ash where I was, and people like he said that would happen. No one believed him, but it's. I mean, this has to change in the TV show. You can't have even if we hadn't kind of progressed in most cases past the damsel in distress motif that is our trope that is always in things, right? even if we hadn't progressed past that bit, you can't have the same thing happening twice to the same characters.
Yeah.
Because it completely takes away their agency. It makes them seem really stupid, right?
And they're supposed to be, they're supposed to be powerful women, in their culture, and this is what happens to them.
So there's a couple things to that, I think, and I'll sort of defend one reason why I think this does happen here, and it's to bring the Aiel back in to sort of, they're repaying the favor. Nynaeve, aided them. They're aiding the three of them, but you learn a lot about the Aiel through their choice to do that, right? Their choice to follow them to make sure they're okay. Their choice to take on Shadowspawn. The way you see them in action, I think is important, and you learn a lot about the Aiel through action, that not by an exposition dump. So that part is useful here. And the other thing that it kind of reminds us is that, yes, Aes Sedai and women who can channel are powerful, but anybody can be taken by surprise. And this is something that Robert Jordan says a lot, that like, if you don't see an arrow coming, an arrow will kill an Aes Sedai, just like any other woman. And so I think that that's important, and that all three of them don't have a lot of experience in the world, so they might think they do to varying degrees, but they don't at this point. So, but I do agree with the point of, let's not constantly have them being captured in the showcase.
I would have done it. I would maybe do it differently, is that they be captured first. They save them. They heal the Aiel afterwards. I think I maybe would switch it around a little bit, so that it isn't like they're afraid that they're going to be caught, captured by these strange women. They take care of them. They get trapped. They get trapped by somebody else. It just becomes and it happens so suddenly. There's like really no. I guess it may well be in, but I would have changed it around.
Yeah.
And then in the end,
sort of like, there's the threat of being captured, and then there's the actual capture by a different.
Yeah, I think what I would have done is have events go the way that they're going, but instead of them getting captured, actually just have it as like a battle, and then the AO just come in as well, and show that the girls haven't just walked into another trap.
Yeah.
But they're actually, they've gone in there to fight, and that maybe their experience or lack of experience shows through at that point, because there's just too many people to fight, and then the AO come in, and you can have the best of both worlds then. Yeah.
All that really does is, like, there's a threat, but it's not a captivity, and it's the captivity specifically that we want to avoid overdoing. And I think I like that idea, that they don't need to actually have that moment of being captive, that they're attacked, they're fighting back, the Aiel come in and fight with them, and that's it.
Yeah, because the captivity thing, it is something that does rear its head quite a lot in
it does.
And it's like, I think to adapt it, it's that you want it when it happens, you want it to have a big impact, so it can't be something that happens every few episodes.
And to be fair, I think in The Great Hunt, Egwene as captive, that has a big impact. That's not
that works well.
This is different, because this is a throwaway, right? This is not like, there's no lasting impact here. I argued for the reason why it's there, and it's showing us something about the Aiel and all that, but I think you would get that by what David is saying, of like having them join in the fight without it being a captivity, and I think that would have been the best way. I agree.
Well, we move over to...
Rafe, if you're listening, Rafe, we are available to consult.
Well, then we have Matt and Tom. Here again, there are some similarities to what's happened between Matt and Tom before. Tom tries to convince somebody that he can sing for his supper. There's a little bit of that going on. So there's a lot of repetitiveness there. Because they go to Arngil, and they get into it they rescue a former illuminator who seems to have issues with the Guild of Illuminators, and she says, no, there's nothing wrong here. And Matt saves her with his quarterstaff, just kind of nonchalantly going in there.
I do love the Illuminators. I love them. I love everything about them. I love the rapport that they have. I love the insults that people's mother are goats and all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
I love everything about them. I really hope they're Italian. I always read them as Italian. I don't know why. Well, I really hope that they are. If they're cut from the TV show, I will sit in the corner and sulk for a little while.
I think you need it. Yeah.
Well,
maybe not in every scene, but I think it's important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah.
And then we have Aludra, right?
Yep. Aludra.
She gives Matt some fireworks as a thank you, which just basically felt like when you're playing a video game and you're about to meet a big boss, you all of a sudden end up in a room full of ammunition.
Yes.
So you know that he's going to use this. Speaking of foreshadowing,
of course he's going to use it. Yeah.
So it's a fun kind of, and I think again, and that's what I kind of meant, that Matt is kind of like a nod to the 80s fantasy tropes, whether Robert Jordan meant to be for him to do that, but he definitely does that. He's definitely like, oh, this happens now because obviously this has to happen because this is a fantasy book. Not that he says it straight up, but you get kind of that feeling of him. He's kind of like the anti-fantasy trope guy at this point.
The good thing about this as well, the good thing about this as well, and this is I think this is why, like, I'm a big, apart from the first two books, from then onwards, I'm a big Matt fan. He's my favorite character, and so a lot of Matt fans really like this book, especially the second half of it, because you get a lot of like classic Matt. You get a lot of his sayings have just appeared out of nowhere that he'd never said in the previous two books. They're here. His personality is there, and the great thing about him is that he gets given these fireworks, this really dangerous thing, and he's completely obsessed with them. Then for the rest of the series, pretty much.
But he needs to have something instead of his dagger.
Yeah. But that's his.
But yeah, he does. He needs something.
Yeah, but that's a great way of developing his character. It's kind of like, it's almost like, I always called him like they've rebooted his character a little bit. When he gets healed, they've rebooted him a little bit.
That's one of the reasons why I do like this book, is because it's the first time I like Matt, as I didn't like him in the first two books, and I like him so much in this book that it was like, whoa, like, where did this character come from? Because I just didn't like him at all before.
Yeah.
And I like his interactions with Tom.
Yes.
The Tom and Matt show is a fun show. So
yeah, it is. And this is why I always have sympathy with when people, and I'm not going to any kind of, this is no spoilers or anything, Chris. But I always have a lot of sympathy with people that kind of have a little go at Brandon Sanderson about his handling of Matt, particularly in The Gathering Storm, because it took Robert Jordan 3 books to get Matt right. So, and like, Brandon Sanderson didn't have that luxury. He had to be like, I have to try and get this right. And, Matt isn't the real Matt in The Gathering Storm. I think Brandon Sanderson will agree as well. But I think he's fine then from then on in Towers of Midnight.
I think it was the one book that he struggled, and then he took feedback and he improved a lot. So
well, yeah, it's a hard character to get right, because it's the thing, like, that kind of character that he is hard to get right, because you can, even the proof is in the first couple of books. And I know the second one, I know there's the caveat of the dagger and everything, but even before the dagger, like, he still isn't particularly likable. Like, he's not like he is in this book.
No, I wanted to smack him in Shadar Logoth before he got the dagger. So yeah. But the other thing, to be fair, to Matt also, is like, this book is the first time we've had a POV from him, right? So part of the charm of Matt is understanding the difference in what he says, what he thinks, and what he does, because none of those three align with each other. And that's where some of the fun and the charm of Matt comes in. And he gets to take a lot more action in this book, and that's where Matt tends to shine, is in his action. But also, we really kind of understand more of what he thinks too.
Yeah.
Well, then we get into the last chapter, which is basically a very short little chapter. Perrin and the rest arrive in Ilion, and Fail, I can never say her name right. I don't even know how I spelled it here. swears to obey Moraine, and she kind of becomes a part of the party.
She joins the party. Yeah.
She
Is this the
joins-
chapter? I always forget when it happens. This is the chapter where she changes the name pretty much because her
Yeah.
hunter name is the same name as the horse, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
He decides not to be Mandarb anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Perrin actually laughs at that or giggles,
Right.
and she doesn't understand why.
That was a good moment. Yeah. Yeah. So she
they're
becomes
nice.
Fayul for real. Yeah.
Really, they're nice together. They're nice.
Yeah,
Oh,
and that
it's nice.
wraps out that session up.
So I remember just being like, you know, kind of surprised that Moraine is willing to like even just like let Fayul like swear and like join them. Like that's kind of a big deal. But I always kind of looked at it as like she probably knew some stuff from Min and like,
Yeah,
you know, had an idea then that there's, you know, there's a link here that's important.
yeah. I always get the thing with Moraine is like our Moiraine. I think we have to call her.
No. I'm not
Moraine.
on that train yet.
No, Moraine is it? I always get the feeling from her that she kind of, if something happens and she resists it, and then the thing keeps happening, she kind of says it's the will of the pattern, and then she's like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be as well. Obviously, the Min thing is a good because obviously she spent a lot of time with her.
Yeah.
But I always feel like she has this thing like if I can push it and it breaks, then that's the will of the pattern, and if I can push it and it pushes back, then that is also the will of the pattern.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and that's giving Moraine a little bit more credit too for her ability to go with the pattern, right? Like as you said, if she might try to resist something, but she won't continue to resist it indefinitely. Like she will recognize the will of the pattern sooner than some people and adapt to it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that in reality, which you will see. So before we kind of wrap up, just like a real kind of quick one, because obviously we've talked about this before, just me and you, Rebecca, and obviously in the show. But the last time we talked about it, we were up to this stage in the book where you've seen these kind of repetitions. Like, if you were going to adapt this into a TV show, into just one season, what do you lose most of the stuff that happens in the Dragon Reborn up until the end, or do you just try and just pick and choose the things that make the most kind of sense?
So I think it wouldn't be like losing all of one book or all of the other book. Like I think you pick the crucial things, because in both books you have characters on a journey. They're traveling, right? These are travel books, and so a lot of the things that happen on one journey could happen on another journey, right? So but if you look at like just Perrin, for example, I think Perrin's story in The Dragon Reborn is much richer than his story in The Great Hunt. Not a lot happens for him specifically in The Great Hunt, so there's no need to like have Perrin's story from The Great Hunt, but a lot of the things that happen to him in this section are stuff you'd want to keep, like meeting Gal and meeting Fayul are important, or you know, maybe meeting the other wolf brother who he sets free. You know, those kinds of things I think are important. Now, but maybe not all of it. Like, do I think it's important that they stop off in Ilion and like find out that there's a Forsaken there? Nope. Don't think it's important. Just cut that out. And then, you know, kind of similarly, like Rand barely has a story in this book, so we don't need to worry so much about like, well, let's make sure we get in Rand's Dragon Reborn stuff because it barely exists, and you're not going to want him gone for a season. So Rand's story would be more of the Great Hunt, and you know, and then the ones that are a little bit more complicated are for the White Tower and the girls, because you know, they have a similar, you know, level of story in both books, but there's so many similarities that you don't want to do it repetitively, so you kind of have to pick and choose there. But but it ends up being like, you know, there's going to be less of that capture and stuff like that, and it will be interesting to see, like maybe they aren't going to meet the Aiel, you know, in that same way, or maybe they will. I don't know, you know. I think we need to meet the Aiel, but maybe it's not necessarily through that particular encounter.
Yeah. That's the thing. Because then obviously, one of the things that I suggested was to get rid of the Sean channel altogether and adjust it all, which I don't think they're going to do. I don't think I would probably do it if I was going to do it, but I reckon there's absolutely been that discussion because if you are moving it into one season of 8 episodes, the logistics of having meeting two new cultures just doesn't work.
Yeah,
and it doesn't work as a story point either as well.
I think that the big Aiel season will be season 3, but that we'd still meet them, you know, or at least some of them in season 2.
Like a handful of them.
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to what it is here. You know, we've only met a handful of them. We have not, you know, really gotten a full sense of their culture. So I think that season 2 could be a Shanshan heavy season with a little bit of Aiel, and then season 3 will be like a big Aiel season, I think.
And would you still think of combining the, not to go into spoilers of
Specific
book, but would you still look at combining the endings of both of them and have them in a kind of a similar location?
Yes, I would, because I don't particularly like the idea of having some characters in Falma and some characters in Tyr. I'd rather have them all in one location.
Yeah, it's be interesting to see, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why they're not really kind of talking about casting for season 2 at the minute, because that would.
Yeah, I wonder about that too, because you know it would be somewhat revealing, particularly if they are getting into characters that are in like book 3. Then you kind of have an idea of what they're doing, you know.
Yeah. So what's next on your channel for what's coming up in the next while?
Well, that's a good question. So, I mean, I am, of course, trying to kind of get prepared for like the show's big, you know, push that's coming up. So, like, you know, just sort of getting prepared for the kind of content I want to do once they're into the big marketing push. You know, so somewhat depends on what they give me to work with, but I'm kind of prepared to deal with that. And also, I do want to kind of, you know, think about like, okay, so there is going to be, you know, new people kind of coming into the series as they start to do their marketing. So kind of, you know, putting out some content with that in mind for people who have maybe not read the books. And then, but and meanwhile, kind of keep going with, you know, the adaptation, kind of how to adapt series that I'm doing. I want to think a little bit more, like I've done some things where I just focus on like a specific season of a show or a specific movie, and look a little bit more broadly at, say, like, how do you adapt internal monologue, you know, and like then use some movie examples and things like that for how to do it, or tie it into like Perrin as a character, because he's got a lot of that. So just looking at things a little bit differently rather than just saying, okay, I'm just focusing on like, how did this movie work? How did this, you know, TV show work? But I have a lot of kind of things cooking too, because like I've been reading and watching, you know, different adaptations. So I'm like kind of ready to like bring in some new material to talk about.
Cool. Good luck. I'll be watching anyway. And yeah, hopefully by the next time you come on to the show, at least the trailer will be out and we can talk about it.
can hope. Well, yeah, that's all that we have for this episode. Rebecca, it was lovely to have you on once again, and I hope we don't get too heated about the status of the Dragon Reborn.
I'm sure we will. Thank you both for having me. I always enjoy it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, well,
I think you're gonna like the ending, Chris.
I'm hoping maybe it can redeem the book.
I think you're gonna like the ending too. The ending is really pretty solid, and so I think hopefully it's gonna really pick up for you too.
Hope so. Well, thank you very much for David Green. I am Chris Mary Holtman, and David will sign us off.
Until the next turn of the wheel.